Hey everyone, today I want to show you a bit about using AuthSession for your Expo React Native apps to authenticate with Google. So I'm going to put some timestamps below so you can just skip this intro part if you want, because I'm going to do a quick disclaimer on what's potentially not going to work for you. There's an open issue for in the Expo repo, and that's that if you're using a standalone Android app, then you're going to have issues with AuthSession because it's going to return a dismiss result instead of the access token once you've authenticated. So that's pretty useless. Basically, it couldn't get working at all. So yeah, if you're using it for iOS, it's fine. And it's fine if you're doing like a prototype using the Expo client. But yeah, I'm going to need to figure out another way for you if you are wanting to use an Android standalone app, which I'm sure a lot of you probably are. So yeah, that's quite a big issue, and it is a recommended way to authenticate using the AuthSession. So it is quite big that it's returning this dismiss result, but it is widely known and for some reason hasn't been fixed, even though it was it's been known about for a while. I couldn't get an idea on when it might be fixed, but I'll show you a bit more about it, and I'll link some posts that might be helpful to you guys. If anyone does get it working, I think you might be able to get it working if you use some custom redirect URLs. But yeah, most people I saw were for Android using the App Auth package, the Expo one for Google, even though that is deprecated now. Just because that was working, this isn't. Yeah, but like I said, if you're wanting to just use in the Expo client for a prototype, it should work fine, just if you're wanting to release a standalone app. There are other issues if you're releasing a standalone app that you might encounter, and one of those is if you're using an emulator, you're going to need to install a web browser like Chrome and set it to the default, otherwise it won't pop up the window. And yeah, so that should really help you if you're facing the issue with the window not popping up on an Android emulator. I know I was a bit baffled for a while on that one. I have found one useful post on the topic, and it's by Luca. So he sort of explains his debugging and how he's found this issue and what the problem is, and it appears to be a race condition. He's suggested a potential fix, but I believe when he tried to raise a pull request and merge that into Expo, there was some issues with the CI/CD. I'll link his comment in the description so you can take a further look, and please, if you figure it out, let me know. So I'm just going to show you the code for how it should work, and it will work for iOS and Expo clients. Hopefully it'll also work in the future once that bug is fixed. So first up, you're going to want to do an Expo install of these packages. I've just commented them in the in my file just because I think it'd be useful to copy and paste across to go and do the install. So that's going to go off and do the install and install the different packages I need. And while it's doing that, I can write some code. So I'm going to want a text, an image, and a button component. That's the button I'll click, and that will open the authentication. The image will show my profile picture once I've authenticated and loaded user info. And the text box will just say some messages. I'm also going to import Google from the Google providers. And I'm also going to import the Expo web browser. So what this Expo web browser line here is going to do is it's basically going to allow your authentication session to complete and return the results back here. So that line is quite important. If you remove it, it won't work. I'm going to use state for a few things. Firstly, for the access token. So I'm going to use state and have this set access token method, and basically based on that I'll decide whether my button is to load user data or authenticate the user, so log in. I'm also going to have this user info state, and if there is user info set, then it will show on the screen. So this is one of the key parts, is you'll want to make this call to use auth request, and that's basically going to return you a request, a response, and a prompt async method. So the prompt async method is what you're going to call to basically authenticate the user or open up the browser. So first up, you'll create a web application inside the Google credentials, and you'll give it a name like Expo. So I'm just showing you what I've done to set it up here. So you can see I've added these authorized endpoints and redirect URLs, and that's purely based on what Expo has said to do in the documentation. I'll link the documentation below. So they also have documentation on how to set up the auth client IDs for iOS native. So they'll be your standalone apps and your Bear apps. So for that you need this bundle identifier set in the app.json, and I did the same for the package for Android. And if I click on that, you can see that this bundle ID matches what I had in my app.json file. For Android, it's a little bit more comprehensive. It's very similar. You'll use the Android package when creating your client ID, but you'll also need to run this Expo Credentials Manager to get a signing certificate fingerprint to put into the client window when you're setting up in Google. So that's pretty much it for setup. I've copied my client IDs, and now I'm just going to show you. You want to pass those in as config. So here I am with my Android client ID that I copied. I won't show you copying the other ones because it's a bit boring, but basically you pass in an iOS client ID with the one that you've set up, and also an Expo client ID. I've deleted these since, so you're not going to be able to use these for your own purposes of testing. You'll have to set up your own. So I'm going to use React Use Effect to basically get the response when it's been given from the browser, and that is basically going to be used to get the access token, which will then in turn be able to be used to get the user profile data, which I can then show on screen and sort of show that the authentication's working. So when the response type is success, then you can set the access token. It'll be in response.authentication.accessToken. So the issue in Android is that instead of success, it just always returns dismiss instead. And yeah, it's a race condition apparently, so it could work for you on occasion, but know that most of the time it doesn't seem to work. So now I'm just going off and calling the Google Profile API. And I'm going to also pass my bearer token, which is the access token I got from authenticating, along with the request as the authorization header, and that will enable me to call the API and get the relevant data. So see, I'm not specifying which user. It's going to know which user it is from the authorization header. So I'm using string interpolation here, so that's what that little tick is, the back tick, I think. And then I've got my access token state that I'll pass through. So now I'm going to want to create a button that will allow me to authenticate. So I'm going to give this button a title. And the title is actually going to be dependent on whether there's an access token already or not. So if there is, then I want to be able to get the user info. And if there isn't, then I want to be able to log in. And on press, I'll have similar logic. So if there is an access token, then I'll go get user data. And I'm just realizing that I actually forgot to complete filling out my get user data, so I'll do that in a minute. And if there is no access token, what I'm going to want to do is call prompt async. So that's the function returned when you go google.use auth request, I think. And I want to actually show in recent. So I want to set this config value to show in recents to true. And the reason I'm doing this is because I found that when I was doing my Android app, it wasn't actually showing it wasn't completing the authentication when I didn't have it show in recent set to true. I don't know if that was emulator specific, so yeah, it might have been. So now I'm completing my get user data. Basically, I'll grab the JSON and then I'm going to set user data to be whatever the JSON is. So that's going to contain my profile picture, my name and my email address. That's some of the data that the Google user info API returns. So I also want to create a function that will show this user data. So basically it's just going to return what should show when there is user info there. So if there's user info, then I'm going to want to return some components to display this user info. Otherwise, I'll just return nothing because I don't want to display anything if there's no user info. I've predefined some styles. They'll be on the GitHub repo and you can access that code later if you want. So the user info API returns a user info object with profile pic, and that is a URL to the profile pic. Oh wait, no, sorry, picture, just picture. And that's a URL to the user's profile picture. So that's why I've provided an image source of URI there, and just giving it a style that I predefined once again. And here I'm just going to show some text. So welcome, whatever the user's name is. And then I'm going to show their email as well. Cool, so now I can call that, and yeah, once again, if there is no user data loaded, then it's just not going to show anything. I think that's looking pretty reasonably good, so now I'm going to go ahead and do a demo for you guys. I'm going to show you in the client first, the Expo client, because that will work on both Android and iOS. It's good for if you're doing like some prototyping just quickly. So here it is in iOS. It prompts me, Expo wants to use expo.io to sign in. So you can actually get rid of that by using a proxy, saying use proxy false. And it will just show you that Google wants you to sign in. So yeah, that's gone and authenticated. It didn't show the login process purely because I had already authenticated on this device. I'll show you it a bit more. I think on Android it will show you. So now I'm doing the same thing on Android. And this one takes a little bit longer to load. You can see it's going via the proxy because you can see auth.expo.io. And it's basically letting you confirm that you're happy with that. But you can see that's worked on the Expo client. So it does work in Expo client, it's just not working standalone. And I'm going to show you that in a second. I've already pre-built some APKs, and all I'm going to need to do is do an Expo publish so that that data sort of so that this code is pushed and available to the SDK, APK that I've already built. So yeah, I'm just adding some text here so I can identify that this is the standalone version, and I've actually done a typo here, show in recents. Without that, it wasn't loading the web browser from the standalone client. So here you go, I've opened the client, it's loading Google. All seems to be working well. I can choose my user and log in. It goes ahead and completes that, and we'll close the browser. But you can see that it didn't actually give me my access token, so I wasn't able to click get user info. I'm going to show you that it actually gives a dismiss here. So how I'm going to do that is I've got this message state that I've just created, and when there's a response, I'm going to set message to whatever the response is. So I'm just going to JSON stringify the response so it can be displayed on screen. And here I'll just show the message instead of standalone proxy. And if I publish again, and then open my app, you'll see it's not saying standalone app, it says null. And when I go ahead and log in, it all looks good once again. I'll click to log in with my account again, and once that completes, you're going to see what it returns to the app. So you can see type dismiss. So basically that's what it's returning to the Android app. And now I'm going to show you that it does actually work on the iOS standalone client, because once again I've built my client for a standalone client for iOS, just to show you that it works as standalone. So here it is loading up. And you can see it's actually returning back an access token there. If I click that Get User Data, it shows my email up there, but you can't quite see it because of the access token data. So if I remove that message, you'll be able to see it a bit more clearly. I also want to show you using proxy false. Basically, that's going to give a bit of a better experience. It's not going to say that Expo wants to log you in. It's going to say Google does. So that's sort of, it seems a little bit less suspicious. So I've published that, and now I've got a login. If I click on that login, it says Google Auth demo wants to use google.com to sign in, which is what you would expect as a user. Then it opens Google for you to sign in. You can click on that, it authenticates, closes, and returns the access token. So you can see it fully works with no problem on iOS. Yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed this tutorial. I'm sorry that it's not so great for Android standalone. I will be exploring more options in the future. So if you've liked this content and want to see a bit more, please like and subscribe for more content.